limit, all the labels here are around minus 100. Okay? Now, I'm claiming that, well, not me, but the big boss is claiming that if you've got a point here, which is of label minus, well, 95, and if you are sure that all the labels here are, let me think, bigger than minus 95, say, then you can be sure that this red path cannot cross here, okay? Because to simplify, all the labels here are 100. Here they are minus 95. So it cannot cross here. And after that, I want to be sure that this point is close to this one. So I want to find a path in the quadrangulation from this point to this one. An easy way to do this is to apply Schaefer construction from this point. I'm looking for the first minus 96. Then the first minus 97. Till I merge with a guy here, which is roughly minus 100. And now I have a path going from this guy to this guy, which is of length roughly 5, because the length here will be 0 at the scaling limit, and here it's 5. So in my construction, epsilon equals 5, and n equals, well, you have to take 100 to the power 4. Maybe I let you think about that. Okay, so let's go. Start with the first exercise, where you've seen during the course that we use a lot the rerouting argument. So it has been explained well in the first lecture of Jean-François Le Gall, but I will come back on this point. Okay, so I guess you all understand what I'm doing when I mean rerouting the tree at this corner, because when you have a plain tree, well, you have a distinguished vertex where you have routed the tree, but it's not only a vertex, you also have a corner of this vertex. Okay, so the tree is rooted here means, well, I have to pick the tree with this, with my 2 fingers, and as in the lecture of Di Francesco, I can handle the tree with this vertex. It's not the same if I put this edge here. Okay, and I can choose to reroute my tree. This one was rooted at this corner. I can choose to reroute the tree at another corner. For example, if I reroute here, so you imagine that here is going to be this corner is going to be the root of my tree. So, well, this part goes here, and the other part here corresponds to this. Okay, and I keep the ordering, the planar ordering of my vertices. So why is this a bijection? Well, to be formal, if I denote the set of trees with n edges by an, then you know that you've got 2n corners. Well, because basically each edge corresponds to 2 corners, basically. So we've got 2n corners, and if you fix k between well, the corners, they are numbered from 0. Is this 0 or 1? 0 up to 2n minus 1. I can reroute the tree at corner k. So why is this a bijection? Well, it's pretty obvious. Imagine, well, whatever the tree I have here, I choose to reroute the tree, well, whatever the tree with, say, n edges, I choose to reroute the tree at the 5th corner. And I obtain this tree. How can I reverse the bijection? Yeah, you consider that this is cyclic ordering, and you will want to reroute. You want to reroute at the 5th corner, but starting in the other direction. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I can choose to reroute the tree at this corner, which would exactly give me the original tree. Okay? So reverse construction. You reroute at, well, minus k, you all understand what I mean, and minus k corner. Well, now we want to understand what is the relationship between the contour function of the original tree and the contour function of the new rerouted tree. So I claim that, well, okay, maybe you can just read the formula on the paper, it's better. So C is the contour function of the original tree. And Matt calls C is the contour function of the tree rerouted at corner K. And here the notation bar stands for modulo 2n. So it seems that this is complicated, but it's not the case at all. So how can we understand this formula? Well, here you're familiar with this kind of formula. You've seen that many, many times. Something plus something minus twice the minimum along, It corresponds to the distance in a tree. Indeed, this is the corner K. Now take I. You want to, this is okay for 0, I up to 2n minus 1. Okay, now if we let run I, in the first contour function of the first tree, that corresponds to let the contour do the turn of the original tree. Okay? And what is this? Well, try to forget for the bar for 1 second. What is ck plus ck, c of k plus c of k plus I minus twice the minimal? Well, if k plus I is here, this is exactly the distance in the original tree between vertex I plus k and vertex k. Okay, let's see that on this picture. What is the height? What is c of k here? It's 1. What is c of k plus I in this case? Here it's 2. And what is the minimal value of the contour function between k and k plus I? Here it's 0 because the contour passes through 0. Okay? So here it's 0. So we just have to add 1 plus 2. And 1 plus 2 is the length of this path, which is the geodesic path in the discrete tree between k and k plus I. Okay? So now let's see on this picture. K corresponds to this guy. K plus I in this example corresponds to this guy. And the geodesic path in blue corresponds to this guy. Okay? So this formula is just the well-known formula for the distance between 2 points in the tree. Okay? Now think a little bit. If k plus I is bigger than 2n, that means that, well, we started here and we had so many that we have done we passed through the root and we are on the other side of the tree. So we have to compute the distance between this guy and, for example, this guy. So now the minimum don't have to run for, well, all this turn. The minimum has to run between this guy and this guy. Okay? So that's the reason for introducing this bar. Okay? So once you have this in mind, that this distance is just the distance, well, another way of seeing that is you imagine that this corner now, you want to reroute here, and you let a fly going around the tree, doing the contour. This fly is eternal. It keeps flying, well, all around the tree in a clockwise, clockwise sense, okay? And at time 0, the fly starts here, and it does the contour. And you record at each time, time 1, time 2, time 3, time 4, etc. You just record the distance from this point. So here it's 1, here it's 2, here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, etc., etc., etc. And this is just this function. Okay? Well, you seem puzzled. No, you're not? Okay, so this is just this function. But, well, this is exactly the definition of the contour function. The contour function is defined as the fly starting from here, and you just record the distance. Oh, okay, it was not the distance, it was the height in the tree. But the height is just a distance from the origin. So once you, well, the proof is here. The height equals the distance from the origin. So if you change the origin, you don't record the height, but you record the distance from this point. This is this formula. Okay? Okay, now that you have this in your hands, what can you do with that? Well, you can take scaling limits of that. You know that if Cn is the contour function associated to a uniform tree in AN, then once again you rescale this contour function by square root of n, and this guy converges to the Brownian excursion, okay, in distribution. Whew. So you can, it's better like this. So you can imagine, okay, I have this statement. Now I want to reroute this statement. So what can I do? So I choose x, for example, in 0, 1. Okay? And I choose kn such that kn divided by 2n tends to x. Deterministic sequence. Okay? And I choose to reroute the tree that I sampled here. I choose to reroute at kn. Okay? So what do I have? I still have this convergence. Why? Because this kn is deterministic. And since it's a bijection, the rerouting thing, okay, well, I can explain with these words. I can say, well, I have a kn in my mind. You decide to choose the tree, and then I reroute the tree at kn. So what do we end with? We end with a uniform tree. So here, reroute at kn, and we call the contour function, I don't know, Cn of kn. So we still have this convergence. Kn is still has the same law as the original contour function. So we do have this. Okay? But this contour function can be expressed from the first contour function using this formula. Okay? So, well, you can express exactly what it is. This is, okay, let's see, Cn Kn plus Cn Kn plus I, well, I have a 2t, well, 2t minus twice the minimum. I don't write. And this tends to E. But you know that this one, well, okay, you can do several things. Well, first, as usual, you can assume that this convergence is almost sure by the Skorokhod theorem. So now this guy here, once rescaled by this factor, this guy will converge to E of x. Okay? Now this guy will converge to E of x plus t, where the is addition modulo 1. And this guy will converge to the same thing, which is written on your paper. Okay? I don't want to write the details, but this is straightforward. You just have to reroute the thing that you have. So in the continuous setting, the result that you get from this discussion is the following. Just take this. Now, in the continuous world, you have the Brownian excursion. You have the Brownian tree. You know the coding from this to this. And what you've just proved is that you take x, whatever, between 0 and 1, and you can choose to reroute. Okay, the initial tree, the Brownian CRT, was by definition rooted at the equivalence class of 0. But you can choose to reroute this tree at the equivalence class of x. Here, here. And this is still a tree. You just have to look like this. You can reroute here. And this corresponds in the Brownian excursion to doing maybe I should have written the formula, but to transform, okay. How can I, E like this? Well, no. E like this. Okay, E of t is equal to E of x plus E x plus t modulo 1 minus 2 times the minimal between x and x plus t that you order of E. So in other words, the excursion corresponding to the tree rerouted here is this excursion. Okay? And this excursion still has the same law as the original excursion. This is not trivial from the continuous world. I give you an excursion like this, and I say, okay, I choose a point, x, and I choose to reroute my excursion here. That means that I consider now this process, prove that this process has the same distribution as the original one. The first, okay, to do a little history about this, it was first proved by Aldous when x was a uniform point in 0, 1. But this proof, which is straightforward from the discrete world, is due to Marquardt and Mokadem. So, in fact, the rerouting holds for every fixed point x. Okay? So it had, maybe you've not seen, but it has been used at least 3 times during the course of Jean-François Le Gall and Grégory Hirmont. They have rerouted the tree at least 3 times. Okay? So now we will use this rerouting in order to study fine properties of the Brownian CRT. Okay, I hope that everybody has understood this. So I just remind you of the definition of the multiplicity of a point. If you have a real tree, it's a compact metric space satisfying some properties. Then the multiplicity of a point, say this one, you just remove this point and count the number of connected components that you have. So in this case, if you remove this point, you have this component and this one. So the multiplicity of this point is 2. Okay? What is the multiplicity of this point? 1. And this one. And this one, but if I add this, 4. So the goal is to show that basically a generic point in the tree has multiplicity 1. Well, it seems very weird on this picture because on this picture I can show you all the points of multiplicity 1. They are the leaves, they are here. There are very few. But in the Brownian CRT, it's not the case. You have to imagine that this tree is very dense and you have a lot of leaves. And the second thing we want to prove is that you can have points of multiplicity 2, of course, 3, some of them. Sorry?
Even here, most of your points are right.
Even here? Most of my points? It depends on the measure that I... okay, if I put the Dirac measure here for my tree, then I agree, most of my points, basically almost all my points are leaves. But if my measure is just the Hausdorff measure of this thing has dimension 1, I have a really honest, brave measure on this thing, and then a typical point will be of multiplicity 2. Okay, so the first question is first to understand why 0, the point corresponding to the image of 0, the root of the tree, is almost surely a leaf. So imagine that you remove this point and you want to prove that you can go from every point in the tree to anyone else. Okay, just before I do the proof, is this the case? Is it the case if the Brownian excursion looked like this? In this case, is 0 a leaf? Well, no, you see, because if you want to go from this part of the tree to this one, which corresponds in the excursion from this part to this part, well, you have to go down to this path and pass and go like this. So you have to pass through 0. So try to figure out what the proof is. So of course, this case does not happen. Why? Because the Brownian excursion has only two zeros. One at 0, one at 1. No else. Okay? So if we take 2 points in the tree, A and B, okay, so they can be attained as the image under the canonical projection of two honest real numbers between 0 and 1, S of n and t. This point corresponds to the A in the tree, and this point corresponds to the B in the tree. Now I want to exhibit a path that goes from A to B in the tree, and this path does not go through 0, through the root. Well, the simplest thing will work. Yeah, you go straight. So you can imagine the path that goes from A to B. So I just recall you remind you of the notation, sorry. PE is the canonical projection from the excursion to the tree. So if you take PE of ST, so assume that S is less than T, then this is a path in the tree. Why? Because this is continuous, and this is a path from S to T, so this is a path from A to B in the tree. Okay, the canonical projection is continuous. And so we have to show that this path does not go through the root. So why is it the case? This path is just this one. Yeah, of course. For every u between S and T, E of u is equal to the distance in the tree between 0 and u, by definition, because distance relative to E is, by definition, E of 0 plus E of u minus twice the minimum between 0 and u of E. But this is 0, and this is 0 as well. So the distance in the tree between any point of your path and the root is bigger than the minimum of u between S and T, and this is strictly positive because the excursion has only two zeros, 0 and 1. Okay, so your path cannot hit the root. Okay, now, why is it true if I take x? I give you x between 0 and y, and I ask, is x a leaf? Answer, almost surely. So for any x in 0, 1, PE of x is a leaf. Well, almost surely. Because here I need, well, I put almost surely. So why is it true? One line. Reroute. You just reroute the tree at x. So that x becomes the root. Okay? Okay, but this is not true, of course, if I remove the almost surely statement, because I can, well, you give me the excursion, and I can try to reroute at a nasty point. I try to reroute the tree here. You see the camera? Here. Can you make it zoom? This is a nasty point. So if you reroute here, then the root of the tree won't be a leaf anymore. But this point has been chosen. Well, this point is not independent at all of the tree. You first looked at the tree, and then you fix it. You took this nasty point according to the tree. Okay? But if you give me an a priori independent variable between 0 and 1, where I choose to reroute the tree, then the tree rerouted at this point will, this point in the tree will be a leaf, almost sure. Okay, now we will try to understand why you can have a point of multiplicity 2, but 3 as well, but not more than 3. Okay, maybe somebody can tell me right away why you can have points of multiplicity 2. I give you the Brownian excursion. Okay, and try to find a point which is of multiplicity at least 2. Minimums. That's too intelligent for me. Yeah. This is not so intelligent, so it will work. Just take a point here and take. Ah. You like it? You want more? No, it won't. Ah! So you just take a point, take a straight line, and look at the last time where this value has been taken, and the first time at which this value will be taken. And, okay, these 2 points, S and T. What is the distance in the tree between S and T? By definition of my 2 points, it's 0. So these 2 points, they represent the same point in the tree. Okay? Okay, I'll try now to do a picture. Okay, this point corresponds to this one. Okay? And I can be sure that this point in the tree will separate the tree into at least 2 components. This one, which corresponds to this sub-excursion, and this one, which corresponds to this sub-excursion. Okay? At least, yeah. It could be if you were very lucky. So is it clear? Do you need a proof of this fact, or is it clear? Well, yes, it's clear. It's clear. Because if I make a proof, it's less clear. So you could be very lucky, and you sample a Brownian excursion, and you've got something very lucky. You're winning 2 billion at the lottery, national lottery. And you take a point, this point here, here. So let's try. Where was my chalk? Maybe this one? I don't know. Okay? And these 5 points are exactly at the same level. So what is the multiplicity of this point? 5. You've got one component here, a second component here, third, fourth, and fifth. Okay? But this cannot happen in the case of the Brownian excursion. Why? Why this case is, sorry, what? Yes, exactly. In the Brownian motion, in the Brownian excursion, sorry, you don't have this phenomenon. You don't have local minima which are the same value, because it's easy exercise to show that if you want to have many components, if you want to have a multiplicity bigger than 3, then you need this local minima, this one, and this one. If you want only 4 components, then you could have something like this. But you need at least 2 local minima to be equal. 2 local minima equal. And this is not the case in the Brownian excursion. Why? Well, first, let me prove that in the case of Brownian motion. So I know we have plenty of specialists of Brownian motion in the room. So what is the shortest proof of this fact concerning Brownian motion? The Brownian motion has almost surely pairwise distinct local minima. I have candies. Okay. So it suffices. Got the Brownian motion like this. And you want to show that this point, the height of this point, is different from this one, from this one, from this one, etc. So it's sufficient to show that if you take rational value like this, then the minimum of your Brownian motion between P1 and Q1 is different from the minimum of your Brownian motion between P2 and Q2. This is obvious. Okay? If for every rational interval the minima are distinct, then they will be distinct. Okay, so now let me do it, for example, for, I like to fix things, but it's the same. Why? This is the case, 3 and 4. So you've got your Brownian motion. It does what it wants between 0 and 1. And now, between 1 and 2, you are careful. You look at its minimum here. Now you've got 2. Now it's 3 again. It does what it wants. And then you've got 3 and 4. And you're careful. You look at its minimum. So why this point, the value of this point, is different from this one? Independence, yeah. Yes. So independence of what? You've got independence of the Brownian motion between 0 and 1, and of the Brownian motion started at 2 to 3. So the minimum, well, let's say mean, of B between 3 and 4 is equal to the minimum, well, let's see, to the minimum of a Brownian motion between 0 and 1, independent, B tilde, which is this Brownian motion, plus the value of a Brownian motion at time 1, which corresponds to this increment here, B1, and plus the value of your Brownian motion at 2. But these two, well, maybe I should, okay. Well, you see what I mean. Maybe I should give an algorithm. It's easier with an algorithm. You are looking for the minimum of the Brownian motion between 1 and 2. Okay, it's here. It's, say, 1. Now you go up to 2. Obviously, the value of your Brownian motion here will be correlated with the Brownian, with the minimum of this Brownian motion between 1 and 2. This is okay. But now, what is going to happen here is independent of what has happened so far, provided that you subtract this value. So if you want your Brownian motion here, the minimum, to be exactly equal to this value, you need what? So you fix your value. This is a value, say x. And now you want an independent, no, sorry, not x. You fix this. This is x. And now you've got an independent Brownian motion, and you want that the minimum of your Brownian motion between, sorry, this is 0 for your new Brownian motion. So the minimum of your Brownian motion between 1 and 2 to be exactly equal to x. Okay? Is it possible? So it's not possible. Why? Because the minimum of your Brownian motion between 1 and 2, this is a random variable. And the only thing that you want to know about this thing is that this random variable has a density with respect to the Lebesgue measure. So if you fix any value, x, then the probability that this guy is equal to x is 0. Okay? So the probability that the minimum here is equal to this minimum here is 0. Well, it's not a proof what I've done, but I've given all the ideas. Okay? So the main idea is that you have your minimum between 1 and 2, and then what's going after 2 is independent. So if you want the minimum between 3 and 4 to be equal to the minimum between 1 and 2, you need an independent variable to be equal to a fixed value. And this is not possible. Okay, so now, why this implies that the Brownian excursion has different local minima? Because the Brownian excursion is like Brownian motion. But here is a statement that will allow us to derive properties of the Brownian motion to the Brownian excursion. So Jean-François Le Gall introduced the Brownian excursion as, you know, the Ito measure of the Brownian motion and so forth. But you've got something simpler to state, but not too well. I give you this lemma for free. Take the Brownian motion. You take the absolute value of a Brownian motion. Okay? So this looks something like this. Okay? And take the first excursion of the absolute value, sorry, of your Brownian motion. First excursion of B outside 0 of length greater or equal to 1. So this is well defined. The first excursion of your Brownian motion is not defined because you've got plenty of small excursion near 0, but the first excursion of length greater than 1 is well defined. This one, for example. And if you denote gauche and droite, the endpoints of this excursion, then the process E of t given by, for t between 0 and 1, given by, okay, so B of gauche plus what? Plus S times droite minus gauche divided by square root of droite minus gauche. Take the absolute value of your Brownian motion. Okay, so this is just this excursion, and you do the Brownian scaling so that this excursion has length 1. So this has length 1, but you need to rescale the space by square root of the time. So this guy is a Brownian excursion, is a normalized Brownian excursion. So this little lemma, which is trivial from the Ito theory, this little lemma allows us to derive properties of the Brownian motion onto the Brownian excursion. So for example, if the minima, the local minima of the Brownian motion, well, it's the same for the reflected Brownian motion. If the local minima of your Brownian motion are pairwise distinct, it will translate onto the Brownian excursion. Okay? Okay, so same proof with the reflected Brownian motion here. Well, same proof, but it's trivially false. The reflected Brownian motion has no pairwise distinct minima. 0 is a minima which is attained a lot of time, but you remove 0. Okay, so from that we deduce that the Brownian excursion has pairwise. Pairwise distinct minima. And from that, you deduce that the CRT has no point of multiplicity greater than 3. Strictly greater than 3. Okay? Simply because of this picture. If you have a point of multiplicity strictly larger than 3, that implies the existence of 2 local minima which have the same value. Okay, so now it's not on the sheet, but I want to give you a crash derivation of the Hausdorff dimension of the Brownian CRT. You've seen this morning that the Brownian map, well, all Brownian maps have the same Hausdorff dimension, which is 4. I want to prove for you that the CRT has Hausdorff dimension 3. So maybe, I guess, everybody is not familiar with Hausdorff dimension, so I will briefly recall what it is. So you've got a metric space. And the Hausdorff dimension of X is, well, so first we define for alpha positive, we define the alpha content of X to be the limit as epsilon goes to 0 of the infimum of the sum of the diameter. This stands for the diameter of the set AI to the power alpha, where AI is a covering of your space X such that all the diameters are less than epsilon. And now you take the Hausdorff dimension of your space. X is given by, let me think, the infimum of all alpha such that the alpha content of X is 0. Okay? So for the people who, am I right? Yes, I guess. For the people who don't know about Hausdorff dimension, you should think about that. You've got a space X, and you want to, this is not true, of course, but you want to compute what is the minimal number of ball of radius epsilon that you need to cover your space. Then, so n epsilon is the minimal number of balls of radius epsilon to cover X. Then this minimal number is roughly epsilon to the minus dimension of your space. Okay, for example, for the line, how many, for the line of length 1, how many balls do you need? Roughly epsilon. For the 1 over epsilon, for the square, you need 1 over epsilon squared, etc. So, okay. So there are always two steps in the computing Hausdorff dimension of things. You've got the upper bound and the lower bound, and they are very different. So here we begin with an upper bound on the Hausdorff dimension, and this is almost always given by suitable covering of your space. So here you've got the Brownian excursion, and you want to compute, you want to find a covering of your Brownian CRT such that, well, this covering is not too bad. Well, this is very well known, and we know that if you've got a function, in this case it's the projection, a function to a metric space which is Hölder alpha, say, then this function can, well, this, of course, has Hausdorff dimension 1. And if you apply an Hölder alpha function, then the Hausdorff dimension of the space that you get is less than 1 over alpha. Okay? And now everybody should know that the Brownian motion is 1/2 minus epsilon for every epsilon, Hölder continuous. So this plus this implies readily that the Brownian excursion is 1/2 minus epsilon under Hölder continuous for every epsilon as well. Okay? So this mapping, if the Brownian excursion, is 1/2 minus epsilon Hölder continuous, it's very easy exercise to see that the projection is also Hölder 1/2 minus epsilon. So you get that the Hausdorff dimension of the CRT is less than 1 minus this for every epsilon. So it's less than 2. Okay, so which is hidden behind this general fact is a suitable covering of the CRT given by this. Well, you can try to take this covering. You take the set A1, A2 up to AN, which have length 1 over n under the excursion, and you consider the projection PE of AI. This will be a covering of your CRT, and you can compute the Hausdorff content and see that the Hausdorff dimension is less than 2. For the lower bound, which is more interesting, we will use, as usual, the lower bound follows from the existence of a suitable measure on your space, a random measure. So the lower bound, you've got basically two techniques, but I will use the random measure. So we need to construct, so it's a crash course, to construct a measure, a random measure a finite, should I say, finite random measure on the CRT, which is non-zero, and such that, well, let's call this measure mu, and you need that the volume of a ball in your CRT around the point x of radius r is less than r to the beta, then this principle will tell you that the Hausdorff dimension of your thing is bigger than beta. Okay? So I let you think about that. But what is the good candidate for the random measure supported on the CRT? Sorry? Exactly. The good candidate, well, it's more than a good candidate, in fact, but it's a very good candidate. Here, the candidate, mu, you define as the projection of the Lebesgue measure on 0, 1. Okay? So this is a random measure supported on your random tree, and you want to show this. Okay? So let's see. So what is the expected volume of a ball in the CRT centered at a point A of radius r? Whoa, this is complicated. First thing, we can reroute. We reroute the CRT, and we can say that this ball is centered as at the root of our tree. Okay? Now, by the very definition of mu, what is mu? If you want to sample from mu, what should you do? Well, it's not difficult. If you want to sample from mu, you've got your Brownian excursion. You sample a point u uniformly over 0, 1, and you take the projection. This gives you a point little u, which is distributed according to mu on your CRT. So this is exactly expectation of you take a point between 0 and 1 uniformly, independently of the expectation. The expectation runs over the CRT, or over E if you prefer, over the Brownian excursion. And now you want to compute the volume of the ball. So you just have to compute the probability that if you take a point uniformly at random, this point has distance from the root less than r. Whoa, it seems complicated, but it's not, because we have rerouted. I'm sorry I'm going over time, but give me 2 minutes and I'm finished. So we want to compute this thing over there. What is dE between the root and the projection of a uniform point u? Well, by the definition of dE, this is just E of u, the height of the random point. Okay, so you just have to compute expectation of, you take a uniform point, du of indicator that E of u is less than r. Okay, so I can rewrite this as expectation, well, probability that the Brownian excursion taken at a random independent uniform time between 0 and 1 is less than r. Okay? Now you can compute this. Why? Because I did a very good job, and I told you yesterday what this variable was. Can somebody remember? E of u. So you take Brownian excursion, random point, u. You want to compute this height. Well, it was the length of the first branch of the spanning tree. Rayleigh. This is the Rayleigh distribution. E of u, you've seen yesterday, as the distribution of a Rayleigh, that is Rayleigh of dx is equal to x exponential minus. Okay? So this is equal to integral between 0 and r of dx x to x squared over 2. Okay? So now r here, what is important is that r is going to 0. So let's do a rough estimate of this. When r goes to 0, this is 1. So this is roughly r squared over 2. Okay? Scooch, scooch, scooch. It's not finished yet. We have some work to do, but I'm sure that you're convinced that this 2 here is the 2 that we wanted here. That is the rough order of the volume of a ball of radius r. The rough order of the volume of a ball of radius r is of order r squared. So the Hausdorff dimension of your CRT will be bigger than 2. But since we have the other bound, this will imply that the Hausdorff dimension of the CRT is 2. Okay, well, for those who are interested in this, I can show you the rest of the proof, but we need a lemma which is a bit more complicated than this one, but I guess it was good to give you the feeling. For computing Hausdorff dimension, upper bound is a covering, or this thing, it's the same as doing a covering. And for the lower bound, you have to construct a random measure, and the good random measure here is just the Lebesgue, the projection of the Lebesgue measure over 0, 1. So I'm going over time, sorry, and thank you for your everything. Any questions? No, you can get up.
What's the matter carried on the leaves?
What's the?